A chilling silence filled the room as Claire Browne closed her eyes for the final time before the cameras. It was December 2012, just months before her passing, and she knew these words couldn't wait any longer. The most controversial and respected psychic of the century had kept a devastating secret for decades. Knowledge gleaned from her deepest forays into the spirit world, a secret she'd never dared reveal publicly. The weight of that knowledge had become unbearable, and she understood her earthly mission wouldn't be complete without this final confession. The recording, hidden for over a decade, finally came to light, discovered among sealed personal documents in a safe recently opened by her family. In it, Claire reveals something that would shake the foundations of modern spirituality, the existence of a spiritual curse that haunts millionaires after death. An ethereal prison built by their excessive attachment to material wealth during life. Claire began her final confession by explaining how she discovered this phenomenon during one of the most intense psychic experiences of her career. It was 1987, and she'd been contacted by an extremely wealthy family to try and communicate with their recently deceased patriarch, an oil magnate who had amassed a fortune estimated in billions of dollars. What she found on the other side of the veil wasn't the peaceful soul the family expected, but a tormented being trapped in a shadowy dimension she described as a gilded labyrinth where every corridor leads to emptiness. The man's soul couldn't ascend to higher planes, because over decades he had created an energy field so dense around his money that it imprisoned him even after physical death. Claire realized this wasn't an isolated case, but a pattern repeated with alarming frequency among those who had dedicated their lives to accumulating wealth. The psychic discovered there's an implacable spiritual law. The more a soul identifies with matter in life, the more difficult its liberation becomes after death. During that terrifying session, Claire witnessed what she described as black energy cords connecting the magnet's soul to every property, every bank account, every investment he'd ever owned. These cords weren't metaphors, but real energetic structures that functioned like ethereal chains, keeping the spirit anchored to the material plane even after the body had returned to dust. The wealth that had been his source of power and security in life had transformed into his spiritual prison. The revelation became even more disturbing when Claire began systematically investigating the afterlife of other millionaires. She discovered a cruel hierarchy in the spirit world. The greater the fortune accumulated in life, the deeper the level of imprisonment after death. Ordinary millionaires are trapped in a dimension she called the gilded purgatory, a space where their souls wander eternally among ethereal replicas of their earthly possessions, never finding satisfaction or peace. Billionaires, in turn, descend to even darker levels, where they're tormented by entities that feed on their energy of greed and material attachment. Claire reported finding the soul of one of the wealthiest men in modern history, whose identity she never revealed publicly, but who had died in the 1970s, leaving behind an unimaginable fortune. This soul had been trapped for decades in what she described as a palace of black mirrors, where each reflection showed a different life he could have lived if he hadn't dedicated his entire existence to the relentless pursuit of more money. The man was aware of his imprisonment, but unable to break the bonds he'd forged through decades of choices based solely on profit and financial power. The psychic explained that this spiritual curse doesn't only affect the ultra-rich, but anyone who has made money the absolute center of their existence. She identified clear signs indicating when a soul is heading towards this post-mortem prison: the inability to find satisfaction in non-material experiences, the constant obsession with numbers and figures, the disregard for spiritual values, and above all, the belief that money can solve any problem or provide any happiness. During her decades of psychic work, Claire witnessed countless desperate attempts by imprisoned souls to communicate with living relatives, not out of love or longing, but to ask their heirs to undo specific business deals or donate portions of the fortune to charitable causes. She discovered this was the only way these souls could begin to break the chains, through posthumous generosity, even if executed by others. The most shocking revelation came when Claire discovered that some of history's greatest fortunes were built by souls who had already experienced this imprisonment in past lives, and returned to Earth with an irresistible compulsion for wealth, creating a vicious cycle that perpetuates across multiple reincarnations. She identified entire family lines where this curse is transmitted genetically, not through DNA, but through energetic patterns passed down from generation to generation. The most terrifying aspect of this discovery was understanding that the curse doesn't only affect the millionaires themselves, but also their families. Claire observed that children and grandchildren of great fortunes frequently develop severe spiritual problems, such as inexplicable depression, addictions, or a persistent sense of existential emptiness. This happens because they inherit not only the money, but also part of the negative energetic burden their ancestors created through excessive attachment to material wealth. The medium revealed she had found evidence that some of history's greatest philanthropists had intuited this spiritual truth and attempted to reverse the curse through massive donations in their final years. She mentioned communicating with the soul of an industrialist who had donated 99% of his fortune before dying, thus avoiding the imprisonment awaiting other similarly situated souls. During that final confession, Claire explained that she had kept this knowledge secret for decades because she understood its devastating impact on society. She feared that the revelation could cause panic among the wealthy, or worse, be used to justify hatred of the financially successful. But with the approach of her own transition, she understood that humanity needed to know this truth so that future generations could avoid the spiritual trap that had ensnared so many souls. The medium revealed that there are specific signs indicating when a person is creating the conditions for their own post-mortem imprisonment. The first sign is when thoughts about money begin to occupy more than 70% of a person's mental time. The second is when they completely lose the ability to find pleasure in simple, free experiences of life. These signs point to a deep desire to master the world with money, promising to create happiness and contentment, but all she did was cause misery.
The third is when they begin to view all human relationships through the lens of financial interest. The fourth and most dangerous sign is when the person begins to believe that their identity is inextricably linked to their bank account. Claire described witnessing the exact moment when some souls cross the irreversible threshold, transforming into what she called golden ghosts. This moment occurs when a person makes a consciously cruel or unethical decision for financial gain, knowing it will harm other human beings. At that instant, she said, the soul creates an energetic mark that will be impossible to erase without an extremely painful purification process. The revelation included details on how these trapped souls attempt to influence the world of the living. Claire explained that many financial crises and economic collapses are partially caused by the interference of these imprisoned entities, who continue to try to manipulate markets through their energetic connections to former possessions. She identified specific patterns in stock market crashes that corresponded to moments when large numbers of these trapped souls simultaneously attempted to recover their earthly fortunes. During her deeper investigations, Claire discovered that there is a complex spiritual geography in the planes where these souls are imprisoned. She mapped different levels of imprisonment corresponding to different types of wealth. Those who enrich themselves through family inheritance are trapped in a dimension she described as castles of mist, where they eternally wander through corridors that dissolve upon being touched. Those who built fortunes through financial speculation are in a space she called the infinite casino, where they are forced to gamble eternally, never able to stop or win. The most disturbing aspect of her revelation was the discovery that some of these imprisoned souls eventually transform into what she called demons of greed. These entities completely lose their original humanity and become parasitic forces that feed on the greedy energy of living people. Claire identified the presence of these entities behind some of the most destructive financial schemes in modern history. The medium revealed that she accessed this information through her higher spiritual guides, who showed her these shadowy planes during altered states of consciousness. She described being taken on an astral journey through these prison dimensions, where she could witness firsthand the suffering of these imprisoned souls. The experience was so traumatic that she developed a permanent phobia of large amounts of money, even breaking out in a cold sweat when seeing high-value banknotes. During this spiritual journey, Claire discovered that there are exceptions to the curse. Some souls manage to avoid imprisonment even when very wealthy, but only when they develop a healthy spiritual relationship with money. She identified 3 essential characteristics of these protected souls. First, they always see money as a tool, never as an end in itself. Second, they maintain a constant spiritual practice that connects them to transcendental values. Third, they consistently use part of their wealth to alleviate the suffering of others. The revelation included specific instructions for those who have already accumulated great fortunes and wish to avoid imprisonment after death. Claire explained that the purification process must begin with a complete spiritual inventory, where the person identifies every important financial decision of their life and assesses whether it was made with love or fear. Then, they must actively seek opportunities to use their wealth to heal wounds they have caused or to support causes that elevate human consciousness. The liberation process is neither simple nor quick. Claire explained that souls who have spent decades building these energetic chains need intensive dissolution work, which can take years even with qualified spiritual help. She mentioned having assisted some living millionaires in this process who reported extraordinary experiences of personal liberation when they finally managed to break their compulsive identification with material wealth. The medium revealed that this information has been kept secret by advanced esoteric circles for centuries, but that the time has come for humanity to mature spiritually enough to handle this truth. She believed that the growing social inequality and cultural obsession with wealth were creating conditions for a spiritual epidemic of unprecedented proportions, with millions of souls unconsciously walking towards post-mortem imprisonment. If you are following this revelation and wish to continue receiving spiritual knowledge that can transform your understanding of life and death, allow yourself to follow more content like this, as there are many other guarded secrets that need to be shared with those who are ready to receive them. During the final months of her life, Claire dedicated herself intensely to developing methods of spiritual protection for individuals working with large sums of money. She created specific visualization and meditation techniques to help maintain a connection with spiritual values even in financially intense environments. These techniques included daily gratitude rituals, practices of conscious generosity, and, most importantly, detachment exercises that teach individuals to view their wealth as a temporary cosmic responsibility. Claire also revealed discovering a time limit for the liberation of these trapped souls. According to her research, after approximately 200 Earth years trapped in these dimensions, the souls begin to lose their original individuality and merge with the collective energy of imprisonment. Once this happens, liberation becomes impossible, and these essences become a permanent part of the shadowy dimensions she explored. During her final revelation, Claire explained that her own spiritual mission had been partially dedicated to rescuing some of these imprisoned souls. She mentioned organizing on astral levels rescue expeditions involving advanced mediums from different spiritual traditions working together to create bridges of light that allowed some souls to escape their gilded prisons. These rescues were extremely dangerous, as the dimensions where these souls are trapped are guarded by entities that violently oppose any attempt at liberation. The revelation included specific details on recognizing when a trapped soul is trying to communicate with the living world. Claire explained that these contacts usually manifest through inexplicable financial disturbances in the lives of descendants, money mysteriously disappearing, investments failing without apparent reason, or a persistent feeling that something is wrong with the family's financial situation. She advised that, in these cases, one should seek qualified spiritual help to investigate whether a trapped ancestral soul is trying to communicate its need for liberation. The most hopeful aspect of her revelation was the discovery that this curse can be broken through specific actions by living descendants.
Claire explained that when heirs to great fortunes consciously choose to use part of the inheritance for humanitarian causes, it creates waves of liberation that can reach the trapped souls and begin to dissolve their energy bonds. She mentioned witnessing cases where a single generous decision by an heir instantly freed a soul that had been trapped for decades. During her investigations, Claire discovered that some of history's greatest social transformations were motivated by trapped souls who managed to influence their living descendants to use their fortunes for the common good. She revealed having identified direct spiritual connections between certain important social reforms and the process of liberating souls who had been imprisoned by their greed in past lives. The medium explained that the true tragedy of these imprisoned souls is not only their individual suffering, but the impact it has on humanity's collective spiritual evolution. She discovered that these trapped entities create a kind of negative gravitational field that attracts other souls to similar patterns of material obsession. This would explain why entire societies sometimes develop excessively materialistic cultures that persist for generations. Claire's final revelation included a prophecy about the future of this situation. She predicted that in the coming decades, with the exponential increase in global wealth concentration, there would be a dramatic growth in the number of souls imprisoned after death. She warned that this would create a kind of spiritual storm that could affect the stability of the ethereal planes surrounding Earth, with unpredictable consequences for humanity. However, she also predicted that this spiritual crisis would trigger a collective awakening about the true nature of wealth and its role in human evolution. Claire believed that humanity would eventually develop a new relationship with money based on spiritual principles that would prevent future generations from falling into the trap of post-mortem imprisonment. During her last days, Claire worked intensively to document specific methods of prevention and cure for this spiritual curse. She developed a protocol she called Golden Liberation, a series of spiritual practices that can be implemented by anyone working with large sums of money. These practices include energetic purification rituals, visualization techniques that maintain connection with transcendental values, and, most importantly, compassion exercises that help individuals see their wealth as an opportunity to serve human evolution. The medium revealed that this information had been shared with her by a higher spiritual hierarchy deeply concerned about humanity's destiny. These elevated entities had observed that the growing obsession with material wealth was creating a spiritual black hole that could eventually suck away the very evolutionary essence of the human species. They chose Claire as a channel for this revelation because she had the courage and credibility necessary to share such a disturbing truth. In her final words before the cameras, Claire explained that her own transition would be different because she had dedicated her life to spiritual service and had never clung to material wealth. She described seeing, during her mediumistic experiences, the luminous dimensions where detached souls are received after death, spaces of indescribable beauty where consciousness expands infinitely and where all questions find their answers. The medium concluded her revelation with a message of hope for those who still had time to modify their spiritual destiny. She explained that true wealth does not seek in the accumulation of material possessions, but in the ability to love, to serve, and to contribute to the elevation of human consciousness. She affirmed that each person has the power to choose their post-mortem destiny through the decisions they make each day, and that it is never too late to begin building a healthy spiritual relationship with money and material life. The recording ends with Claire closing her eyes and whispering a prayer of protection for all who would hear her words. She asked that the truth she was revealing be used with wisdom and compassion, never to judge or condemn, but always to educate and liberate. Her final words were a declaration of faith in humanity's ability to awaken to its true spiritual nature, and to use that understanding to create a world where material wealth serves the evolution of consciousness, never imprisons it. Months after her death, when this recording was discovered, many researchers independently began investigating Claire's claims. Some reported similar experiences during their own psychic investigations, confirming the existence of dimensions where souls trapped by material attachment wander in suffering. Others developed therapeutic techniques based on her revelations, helping wealthy individuals develop healthier relationships with their wealth. Claire Browne's revelation about the spiritual curse of millionaires remains one of the most disturbing and important insights ever shared about the nature of the afterlife. It reminds us that our earthly existence is a precious opportunity for spiritual evolution, and that every choice we make, especially regarding money and material power, has consequences that extend far beyond the moment of physical death. Her courage in sharing this difficult truth continues to inspire those seeking to live more consciously and spiritually aligned, knowing that true wealth resides not in what we possess, but in the love we cultivate and the service we render to the evolution of human consciousness.